Oh, we got Cindy Lewis in the house. We're going to get onto Facebook right now. So if you're anywhere on Facebook, you got to head over to the Hawaii Sports Fans page and check us out, because we're going to talk some Rainbow Warrior and Wahine volleyball, actually, because today we got, or recently we got some news that the Wahine volleyball season, the entire Big West season, I'm going to actually check to make sure you can hear me properly. So can you folks hear me? Okay, it looks like you can hear me. Okay. Cindy, are you there, Cindy Lewis? I'm going to check to make sure. Can we hear you? Okay, I want to make sure that we can get Cindy. Okay, so I actually, my Cindy's audio might be a little bit off, and that is totally my fault. So we're gonna get Cindy Lewis on here, but I'm gonna have Cindy wait just a second. But we're live anyways, so I'm gonna take her off screen so she doesn't have to watch me, or she doesn't have to worry about people watching her. But today it's a Wayne Coito show. We have a lot to talk about, because we'll talk to Cindy Lewis soon once I make sure we can get our volume going, but we're going to talk the New Mexico Bowl as well. We're going to talk the UH being invited to what it looks like is going to be a big game for the Rainbow Warriors, which is another game that we didn't expect to be having this year. But nonetheless, we are happy whenever we have Rainbow Warrior football. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about why we're seeing so many Rainbow Warriors in the transfer portal, guys, that we never expected to be seeing. I'm not sure why. We kind of know why, right? We kind of know that we knew that it was going to be tight, that roster spaces were going to be tight. And we also knew that with scholarships and with the numbers, it would just be a numbers game. In this offseason, we would see some transfers and some people that we probably didn't expect to see, especially some really beloved players. We already saw some local boys, which is hard to see. We saw Miles Reed today, and we're going to talk about that. First person I thought about was his mom, Carmen, who comes to all the games as well. And that is something that is so, difficult for some of us who love to see our Rainbow Warrior Ohana every time we're on the road. I'm going to work on this. Cindy Lewis, if you can hear me, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, let's see if I can hear you on screen. I'm trying to bring you in, but at the same time, it is my fault. Some of you guys might be able to see I have some new technology. Okay, so I can kind of hear Cindy right now as well. So I'm going to bring Cindy back on into the screen. And Cindy, and I apologize, because I know you got all of Cindy's fans checking in with us, ready to hear her and see what she has to say. Let me know. I'm going to see if I can hear you, though, on camera. So, Cindy, how are you doing today? Aloha. I can hear you. I just want to make sure our fans can hear you out there. Okay, I can hear you, but it's still kind of faint. So I'm gonna change. I can
talk louder.
Okay, well, that's probably the loudest. I don't wanna make you have to talk super loud, but we can hear you. If the fans are having a hard time hearing her, let us know. I'm gonna try and bring it on as loud as possible. Okay. All right, Cindy. I think we can hear you pretty well now.
Do you hear the ducks? I have ducks in the backyard. So funny. Quack, quack.
So Cindy Lewis, we have you now, I think, going and live, and everyone is, heading over to cindylewis.com. I hope they are, because cindylewis.com is where you're going to find the latest from Cindy, because, obviously, as we know, we talked about it with Paul Honda earlier this summer when a lot of some of our favorites in the Star Advertiser, we were had to bid aloha to them and write their last columns. And Cindy was a part of that wave. And, these are irreplaceable people. So luckily with the internet, we're able to, have some of these, have access to some of their content and their words, and cindylewis.com is one of those places. So definitely head over there if you are wanting to find out the latest. But right now we're going to talk to Cindy Lewis anyways. Today she posted about the Rainbow Warrior volleyball team and speaking to Coach Charlie Wade and Coach Wade and Coach Almo Santos dealing with very different situations because the Rainbow Wahine were told that their season is not going to happen. It was postponed indefinitely this summer, and then now it's just pow, it's gone, and that's so hard to see and to hear. But with good news for the men, they plan on playing. That's for now, we don't know, but it's just such an awkward situation. So we're gonna let Cindy Lewis kind of parse it out for us. But Cindy, just talk about what all of the latest that you've been hearing on both sides.
Well, unfortunately, I really haven't been able to speak to Coach Amo. She did text me, and after I said, I just texted to say, hey, I'm really sorry that the season's over. And she was like, it's rough. It is what it is. The girls are trying to process. We're not sure.
All right, Cindy. I think we can hear you pretty well.
Happen with the eligibility if the NCAA will allow, as
it's just
they
such
did
an awkward
with the spring sports 2020 to have basically freeze the eligibility and when they resume. So you're like with the Warriors, you're going to have a lot of 5th and 6th year seniors because they're allowed to finish out with one more year. It hasn't been announced whether what's going to happen with the Wahine seniors and the rest of the team as to whether they will have their eligibility frozen and be able to resume fall 2021. With the Warriors, it was nice catching up with Coach Wade today. Nothing's official. I did kind of bury the lead. It hasn't been announced yet, but it's looking like the Warriors will host the Big West tournament, postseason tournament, it'll be late April. I think that announcement's going to come, Charlie thought, sometime this week. So, yeah, it's kind of buried a little bit because I just wanted to, kind of prep with what was going on with the men. Sounds like they had their fall practices. Most of their European players stayed home, and the NCAA allowed those players to do going on in Bulgaria, but the other European players stayed home. Demetrius Muklias is going to have foot surgery, so he's actually going to sit out the spring to rehab with that. He's a freshman from last year. But everyone's expected to be back in Hawaii to start the first day of practice, I believe, is my birthday on December 28th.
Oh, wow.
So
So it's to be your birthday pretty soon, and I know you would love to be celebrating a Wahine Final Four or something because it's like December always means to you, I'm sure, Wahine volleyball. Not just the holidays, but I got to be there in 2009. I went to Stanford to the regionals when Konani was the MVP there and led the Wahine to the Final Four. And I know just how exciting it is for you to have that in your clock, your rhythm, to be able to have Wahine volleyball. But what has been it like for you this season? And you knew going into it that you wouldn't be covering it as well, but with everything abruptly kind of coming to a close for you, or what kind of were the initial feelings for you?
well, as you were saying, when I basically took a voluntary layoff, and I feel good about people want to read my first post on my website. I feel good about the way I left because what I allowed someone to do was save their job. After 39 years, I was happy to be able to make way and hope that whoever I job I saved. It has 39 years too. So I felt pretty good about that.
Mm-hmm.
It is a little weird because you're so used to having the day to day and blogging every day and just being able to interact with players. And so that I think that was not having that interaction with players and coaches and even fans once you're at the game. That was kind of I had to go through withdrawal on that, and especially this month where we're so used to traveling for postseason. Some of these memories kept popping up on Facebook, and I'm like, my son Tiff Wells does radio
Mm-hmm.
for the Wahine, so we have pictures of us. And last year at the airport a year ago, we were in Minneapolis airport, and we had a selfie, and so that's been the weirdest thing. Is that to see these memories pop up and go, oh yeah, that one year we were at the Vikings game, Skull. That was kind of cool.
Yep.
Yeah, but it's been weird because I have been, except for I think 2 years when I was sports editor of the paper, I've been to their postseason every year. So that was just kind of withdrawal having to go through. Just like, there is no normal right now. But I think for me it's been more missing the day-to-day coverage and writing day-to-day. And so it's always kind of cool to be able to get back and do, some blogging and writing and do stories that aren't necessarily about volleyball.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I covered more than volleyball during my career. And I think the story I wrote last week was about the passing of Rayford Johnson, who was probably my favorite all-time interview. And so, it was kind of nice to be able to do that. And talking to Evan Silverstein, the assistant beach coach, and just talk about his being a yogi and how his
I was muted. I might have muted myself. Can you hear me now? There
I
you go.
can't think.
Okay. See, we're all kind of having all these fun technical issues today on the Wayne Coito show, which is not normal thing actually, and it's all me. None of this is my guess. This is all myself, but I'm trying to change things up. 2021 is going to be a really exciting year because I'm going to be putting out all kinds of cool content. So we're changing things going on in 2020. We're going to end December strong. Cindy Lewis is, writing books and children books, and actually I'm writing a film right now, a short film, which I'm going to be producing. I'm going to tell right now. And we're going to be producing it under the Hawaii Sports Fans banner. So if you see ESPN films, we're going to do Hawaii Sports Fans films. And it's going to be live action scripted. So I think I'm feeling the Cindy Lewis vibes of writing and overcoming that writer's block. But at the same time, sports is life. And, I spend a lot of time watching and being there at the games. But Cindy Lewis has been on the sidelines for so many years, and she has so many great stories. And on her website, one thing that I really enjoyed was that Wahine volleyball match when she recanted the WAC championship in 1998 when the Wahine beat BYU in 5. And I was in Hawaii at Aloha Stadium at the Michigan game, Hawaii versus Michigan. The game wasn't as close, surprisingly, Hawaii and Michigan, as the Wahine volleyball game, Fred Von Oppen's last game. I think, that's a day in time that kind of stands out for Hawaii fans because it was like, wow, we won the WAC championship, but oh gosh, this football. But Cindy has a great story from when she was there and talking about Charlie Wade calling overlaps on the other team. I mean, that's some very, those details are really important to the whole story. So I thought that was really cool to hear that. But, Cindy, when you look back on your time and covering Coach Shoji and this team, what stands out the most, or people or stories, I think, amongst your career that is hard to top?
compliment to Wahine volleyball players. I mean, I think that the quality of student athletes that brings into the program is really special. I mean, you have to, people have to really want to be here. And I think that I think more than how successful the programs have been, it's just the quality of the people you have. And you've seen them go on to just do great things with in their professional careers too. And it's like Mahina Eleneke, if you remember from the '87 national championship team, undersized Sacred Hearts girl. Appreciate that. Like she was head of school for La Pietra until her retirement, and now she and her husband have a farm out in Waimanalo, and they're raising sheep, and they're
Wow.
making cheese. But more than anything else, she's given back to the community, especially the homeless in Waimanalo. And last year, they couldn't do it this year, but last year they feed the homeless, and the community service project for the Wahine last Thanksgiving, and I also participated, was they made, for lack of a better word, plate lunches for everybody, for the homeless. So everybody got some turkey, got dressing, and just made this plate lunch. And the Wahine got to take this to the homeless camp. So that kind of speaks to, I think, the quality of people that have come through this program. I mean, there's been some great matches. You mentioned the BYU match. You mentioned the Stanford match where Kanani Danielson, after that match was over, I just remember her. She was so iced up that she could barely walk across the court, and she was in such pain from her knees that I just remember her barely able to walk across the court to her dad, and it was like daddy, and fell into his arms. I mean, that's a poignant little moment for that she had played so well too, but she played through a lot of pain to make that happen. And that was, it was Anelli Kubio-Tonero that was so in pain at that point. And she played through so much too, and Kanani did as well.
Mm-hmm.
But there's just been fun things. I'm thinking about the '87 championship team when we were in Minneapolis, the '88 team that lost to Texas in the national championship. And what I remember is that it's usually around Christmas, and either win or lose, both of those times when we were on the road, the Wahine were in the hotel. It wasn't the bar, but there was a piano in the hotel. And if I remember correctly, Martina Sensarova's dad played piano. So they were, the team was down there singing Christmas carols. And they invited, 87, they invited Stanford to come sing. And in '88, they invited Texas to come sing. So you have these two teams that, gone through the battle at the national championship, joining in the holiday spirit and singing Christmas carols in the hotel lobby, which I thought was kind of sweet.
Well, that's a great story. I think when you look back on, it's funny because when you ask people memories from covering a team or a sport or a game, it's a lot of the off-court stuff, right? It's like that stuff that a lot of people don't get to see that is truly the meaning behind sports and why we love sports so much. It's that, who was it? That Kobe quote that said, like, sports is, exact. It's like a replica of life, like a microcosm of life. And you have these relationship with these players. They are like your nieces or your sisters, and then kind of like nieces. And as you, now though, a lot of these Wahine, unfortunately, this year's, there's some awkwardness, obviously, because they don't get to play this year. They already know they're not going to get to play, and that's rough because, we've tried so hard to get football on the field, and we've talked about how much we wanted football and blah blah blah, and the Big West goes and cancels fall sports, and it's like so many people are like, oh, I thought that happened already. Like they're so flippant about it, like, oh, the Wahine, oh yeah, and that's so weird to me because it's almost like disrespectful to them because they've been such a team that has been so successful, and that is so impossible. I don't need you to, reaffirmed that, because we already know that when you are not a Power 5 school, you are put at a significant disadvantage for every sport, regardless if it's not football. And Wahine volleyball has still managed to be competitive nationally. That is just so impressive. And we don't get a chance to see them this year. So with that in mind, Cindy, how do we approach as fans, and how do we reconcile this, seeing, certain sports going on and certain sports kind of put on the back burner?
Well, I think what is sad is, for one thing, the Big West doesn't have football, so
Mm-hmm.
they weren't even dealing with football. Um, and when I was talking to Coach Wade, I said, "Do you think that the Big West was a little premature in canceling their season?" And you look at it, and technically, it was only the non-revenue sports from fall that were canceled. So they kept basketball, and you're thinking, soccer and cross country it's played outdoors, so
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to figure out where the rationality was for
Yeah.
canceling outdoor sports when you're allowing basketball to play.
Yeah.
And I think, one, it came down to revenue. Basketball generates revenue outside of Hawaii, making money. I mean, the Wahine are one of two or three programs nationally that make money. I mean, it's a non-revenue sport, and that's what happened. I think it was an easy thing to do, since the conference was going to lose money for travel and stuff if they kept the rest of the fall sports in season. But I think the bigger issue was going to be facilities. And
Mm-hmm.
at some point, if you were going to have all of your fall sports on top of the winter sports, on top of the spring, it wasn't just necessarily facilities, it was the training room.
Yeah.
And I think, Coach Wade had a good point when I asked him, was it premature? To me, it was based, since the Big West is a all California conference without UH. It was more, given the seriousness of what's going on with COVID in California, I could see the lockdowns happening there. But given that, hopefully the vaccine is going to work, things are going to get better. I thought that maybe the conference should have waited till maybe early January
Mm-hmm.
before they made that decision. But I think Coach Wade had a really good point. He says it's not really the facilities as much as it is the number of athletes that would have to be sharing the training facilities, and that is a virus waiting to happen. And the biggest issue would be if any of the trainers had to quarantine. Then you're putting your student athletes at health at risk for not having someone supervise the workouts and things. So if that was going to be the case, you see why. But I think what they should have done is, the NCAA, I think in fall, said, no, we're not going to allow. We're just, forget about fall 2020. Everybody moves on to 2021. But I thought it was, instead of saying, hey, we're going to have spring volleyball for women, but I thought it was weird that they allowed some of the conferences to play women's volleyball. And to me, if they were going to have a spring championship, they should have said no fall volleyball. So you had like 3 or 4 conferences play fall volleyball, which I thought was really weird.
Yeah.
So, I think you've got to take a look at the student athletes' health, and you take a look at the training room. And that was going to be a huge thing, to have everybody in there overlapping with all these sports. Hawaii doesn't have a full complement of, they don't have men's soccer. They don't have men's water polo. So if you add some of the larger schools that have, more than 20 teams playing, might have 30 teams playing, and they're all trying to get into their training room at the same time. I think that could be a disaster waiting to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it was for the best of the overall good, I guess, but it is really sad given the importance of and the history of women's volleyball in Hawaii, that no season.
Well, that is going to be hard to reconcile, though, when you have federal regulations and statutes, especially one that was championed by someone from Hawaii like Patsy Ming. So when we look at Title IX issues, which are going to be brought up as well, do you think that we just kind of let those whatever who can play this year, or do you think that's even being considered? Because I feel like that could be another one of those ticking time bomb things that could come back.
A lawsuit waiting to happen. I think the problem will be is that women's volleyball is such a little blip on the athletic screen, and for the most part, it's a non-revenue sport. And where I think you saw the push for football and for basketball is it generates millions of dollars in TV revenue. You know, even March Madness for basketball. That I think that was the impetus to get football and then basketball on the board because of the TV revenue. Because, you know, without it, everybody's going to not have any money.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly.
So yeah, I think, and then you're talking about the smaller conferences, as you said, the non-Power Five. You know, the Big West would have no standing; it would have no power behind them to have a lawsuit or an injunction
Mm-hmm.
against some of the other. You know, and I think it's going to be a conference decision, and we'll see if the other conferences how they manage. I mean, you look at if Stanford's going to drop men's volleyball, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the MPSF, but of course there's a fight to keep that going. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, as you said, with Patsy Mink and Title IX, it could be more of a gender equity issue than Title IX. But I think the Big West took into consideration it was supposed to be for the health and safety of the athletes. It's just too bad that they just didn't string everybody along and say, oh yeah, we're playing in spring.
Yeah. Well, I think, it'll be something that we talk about for a long time. I think after this year ends and the dust settles, or hopefully we can see the end and the dust settling eventually, we'll have a lot to talk about. But I'm going to bring Cindy on again because I apologize for any of the audio issues that we're having. But Cindy Lewis, mahalo for joining me. Mahalo for your patience as well. And I'm going to get you again on soon so that I don't mess you up anymore with all of my crazy audio issues. But thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me, and you should tell your listeners. I'm like, we could be cousins. Our grandparents, our relatives are from the same small little village in Madeira, Paul de Mod. And I mean, what a coincidence.
It is an amazing coincidence, and I'm definitely going to remind them of that because that was an impressive time there too. I got to be there during the World Cup and Portugal playing, and the World Cup being in Russia, obviously, but just being there and being in the street and everybody just playing and watching, it was pretty incredible. So very exciting.
Ronaldo is from Madeira.
That's right. Yep. And Cristiano Ronaldo is from Madeira as well. It's pretty cool. Well, we'll talk about a lot more Portugal for sure, and even more with next time with Cindy Lewis. Mahalo, Cindy, for joining us.
Aloha.
Aloha. That is Cindy Lewis from the Honolulu Star Advertiser, or formerly of the Honolulu Star Advertiser. That's where you would hear her name or remember her being on the sidelines and covering Wahine volleyball, covering Rainbow Warrior volleyball. You hear her son, Tiff Wells, doing play-by-play. So definitely a volleyball family, and definitely one that has been around and seen a lot in Hawaii. And if you are in the Enchanted Lakes area, you probably might see Cindy from time to time or hear the quacking of the ducks in her backyard. So if you did hear any of those things, that's good because it was hard to hear the interview in general. And a lot of that was on my end too. I'm trying some new equipment. So and Zoom is not a perfect thing. So I can only do so much on my end. And that's how it is with technology, right? You can only do what you can do. And I can only manage what I can on that side on my side. So, but thank you for those for commenting and letting me know. Let's talk Rainbow Warrior football now. I think this image says it all. I think it's pretty funny. The New Mexico Bowl, and underneath it's a logo of the New Mexico Bowl. So it says New Mexico Bowl, and then underneath it says Albuquerque. Because that's where the game is supposed to be, or usually is, but it will be in Dallas. So somebody edited the logo to show New Mexico Bowl and underneath suburb north of Dallas, which is, I guess, a perfect way to describe Frisco, Texas, which will be the home of the New Mexico Bowl this year. Obviously not in New Mexico or at Albuquerque. Last time the Rainbow Warriors were there in Albuquerque was last year, actually, playing the New Mexico Lobos. And this year they obviously are in a much different position. 4-4, but still got into a bowl game, which is amazing and great and good for so many different reasons. Obviously, it was a surprise to me. Some people asked me, "Oh, were you surprised that they got a bowl game?" And I was surprised just because, and surprised and not. Surprised because, 500 usually not going to get a bowl, but also not surprised because this year, even though there are less bowls, there are probably less teams that are going to be willing to play in bowls, and there will be different factors, different standards to be able to play in a bowl game. This year, the Rainbow Warriors did what they needed to do, finished 4-4, good enough to get the 4th bid from the Mountain West. So the Mountain West, in most years, the Mountain West, right, unless you're the champion and you are, or you're going to a New Year's Six bowl, you are, going to be locked into whatever the Mountain West champion goes to. But typically the other games are kind of up for grabs, right? The other teams can go to whatever bowls want them. So usually it's the Hawaii Bowl that wants Hawaii, obviously. Cindy says that was fun. Muito obrigado. So muito obrigado to her as well. Cindy Lewis. Sorry, we're going to have her back on again. I'm going to try and bump up the audio too when I put it on the podcast and when I put it on YouTube so that you can hear what she had to say. She talked about Rainbow Warrior volleyball and Rainbow Wahine volleyball, and just this year the difficulty. I mean, the Rainbow Wahine are not even going to be able to get on the field. The football team is going to be in a bowl game. The Wahine volleyball team couldn't even get on the court, and that is, pretty sad. And that's something that is needs to be talked about, because if student athlete experience is important, then definitely having the same opportunities available to all student athletes, such as playing in a regular season, let alone a postseason. I mean, for football, that's great. They got in a regular season and a postseason, and they still get the year off. So imagine that. You get to have a year of eligibility, and also at the same time, you're able to play a season. So that year of eligibility, meaning that extra year I'm talking about. So next year, the seniors are able to all come back, if they're coming back, right? And that's something we'll talk about as well. But this New Mexico Bowl, Hawaii gets in. Hawaii gets the 4th bid from the Mountain West. Typically, Boise, if they win the championship or whoever, they'll go. If they can't get into a New Year's Six Bowl, they'll go to wherever the Mountain West champion is supposed to go. I think the Las Vegas Bowl usually. But they can go to any bowl they want. The champion can go to whatever bowl they want. And usually the Hawaii Bowl is going to take Hawaii. If Hawaii is eligible, obviously. But that's kind of why the Hawaii Bowl exists, for Hawaii. So when we talk bowl games, we're only thinking Hawaii Bowl, or we're thinking, hey, maybe we can get to a New Year's game. But this New Mexico Bowl just came out of the woodworks, and it took Hawaii. So that is something that's really exciting. Cindy and I were talking off camera a little while ago about how San Diego State, though, what they must be feeling on their campus, because that's a tough one for them to swallow. With the season they had, I mean, first of all, they beat us. They beat Hawaii. So San Diego State, at the end of the day, they'll be able to at least say they beat, Hawaii, the team that got one of the bowl bids. But the way that the Mountain West did it this year, rather than the bowl games being able to pick whoever they want, they went down in an order. So the top 4 teams were going to be able to get one of the 4 Mountain West tie-in bowl games. And Hawaii got the very last one, the 4th bowl tie-in, which is New Mexico Bowl. So Hawaii did enough. Had San Diego State, first of all, got a better record. So that's one way. They didn't have to lose to Nevada. Hawaii beat Nevada. But it was pretty funny because San Diego State also scheduled an additional game, which teams could have done if they wanted to. Give your team a little bit more, experience. Give your boys a chance to get more exposure maybe, and that's what San Diego State did, right? In scheduling Colorado, who is a good Pac-12 team. You know, they had some good wins and were ranked, I believe, at one time this year as well. They might have been ranked at the time of the game. So San Diego State took that risk to play Colorado, and yeah, they were in. So Colorado was ranked, and San Diego State dropped a game to them. So that added to their overall win-loss record, which is what the Mountain West took into consideration. So this year, the Mountain West did not do just conference records. They looked at their entire overall record. So if you went and, you know, scheduled these one-off games, I mean, you did that on your own, you know, and that's just the thing, right? This season was weird anyway. You didn't know if you were going to have a game every week. And Hawaii got through all 8 games. So that is really impressive. And I think maybe significantly lucky, because that's just not something that's happened. But Hawaii still went 4-4, right? Fresno State was 500 as well, but they were 3-3. So they played 2 less games. And the conference counted it the same as well. But Hawaii getting that spot against against Houston, the other UH, that'll be an exciting game. But Coach Graham, what's exciting for him is he gets a chance to evaluate some players, because we're going to see some that aren't going to come back next year. And today we already saw another name, Miles Reed, a guy that we expected a lot of big things from this year, a guy that was really involved in Rolo's offense last year. And it's funny because I'm saying the same thing about a guy like Lincoln Victor, who also entered the transfer portal and who's made himself available to other teams. And I'll just say, this is not a normal year, right? Because, yes, you know, Lincoln and Miles played for Coach Rolovich, and, you know, this is a new system. So it's not surprising at all when a new coach comes in, you see players leaving the program. But more than usual, having this COVID season make everything kind of go haywire in terms of eligibility, in terms of the doors opening and the doors closing. And that's where the issue is going to be, right? The seniors graduating this year and the seniors graduating from high school, I mean, they're battling for spots against each other. Basically, again, not necessarily against each other, but teams, just because they're going to be able to let kids stay for another year of eligibility, these programs might not necessarily have the money to pay for their scholarship. I saw no legislation that said a team can have more scholarships. That's not legislation that you know, was brought up at the same time as a blanket waiver of a year of eligibility, which is a great, you know, waiver that the NCAA passed, so they won't have to worry about all these kids saying, hey, I want another year back because the pandemic stole a year from me. So the NCAA is going to go ahead and say, okay, everybody gets a year back, and they did that for, you know, men's volleyball, who's coming back. Baseball, I believe, also got that. I believe baseball also got, yeah, because baseball just had started when the pandemic kind of started. But Wahine volleyball is stuck right now because they didn't have a season this year, and, you know, they're going to be wondering whether they're also going to get the same treatment and have a blanket season. You already saw in the Wahine volleyball team, you know, like Hannah Helvig staying in Europe and not coming back to the U.S. She kind of knew that they probably wouldn't get on the court, and she was smart, because it would be really even more difficult, I think, having that anticipation or that excitement and being told, like, hey, it might happen, and then, you know, you're not able to get into your season at all. Not even a single game for Rainbow Wahine volleyball. So tough one for them, but, you know, the years will go on, and the year will come back again very soon. But at the same time, now the cloud of uncertainty moves over to the spring season. The winter season right now is interesting because men's and women's basketball teams, you saw both of them play. I gotta shout out the HPU women's basketball team, Hawaii Pacific. You know, I cover the Pac West, and I cover the Pac West basketball tournament every year for Pac West TV, and as well as all the sports. But following Coach Reed, Takasuka, and HPU, Sharks women's basketball team has just been amazing. And last year, to be able to see them win the Pac West title and get the bid to host, which is so unheard of for NCAA Division II team, in Hawaii. Not necessarily unheard. We've seen BYU Hawaii, but it's just rare, right? The NCAA does not want to send a bunch of teams to Hawaii. They just have never been that way. So HBU finally got that bid, and then they get back to Hawaii, and they're told that the tournament is called off. So super painful for them, for HBU women. They don't get that chance to, cash in and win that national title. But they did beat the Wahine, so a big win for HBU Sharks, beating the Rainbow Wahine. And, a big local rivalry, obviously, or maybe not a big one, but everybody looks at it as a little brother, stepbrother, or little sister, stepsister type of thing. And it's nice. It's nice. So, of course, we're Hawaii sports fans over all of Hawaii, so I'm not going to choose sides in Hawaii versus HBU, but I will say that it is cool to see HBU, even though they had to play the Wahine, win that game, because it shows just how strong the basketball is in Hawaii. Coach Reed is a local boy. He coached at Hawaii Baptist Academy. He's a guy that grew up here, so to see him be the coach as well and lead HBU is really cool. So shout out to them. But as for them as well, HBU and the Pac West, the Pac West conference schedule is still up in the air. And the men and women's basketball team, they are scheduled right now to continue with the Big West season. But you're hearing coaches like Coach K, Coach Krzyzewski of Duke, talking about why are we playing, talking about why we should keep the possibly cancel the rest of the season, or at least postpone it till the spring, till now that the vaccines are starting to be distributed, maybe by then we'll have more people with the vaccine and we can go forward. I was just reading an article today, it was in Billboard, about the future of concerts and Ticketmaster, and I'm sure it'll apply to sports, concerts, any gatherings. You may have to get clearance from a third party that assures Ticketmaster that you actually got the vaccine. Like, it'll get to that point where there will be a verification that you have the vaccine to be able to purchase tickets. So, I mean, it's not going to be a future where we're going to just immediately return to, when we do return to full capacity in arenas and stuff, expect to need to have a vaccine or prove that you have the vaccine, which is crazy because it's just a different world. But at the same time, I plan on taking the vaccine. I believe in its effectiveness, and if science can prove it as well, which so far it's shown that we're able to keep the virus at least manageable through the NFL season. And we thought that maybe in the college season we might be able to have the same luck, but we haven't, right? And it's gonna push over to college basketball, because college sports just aren't pro sports. They just don't have the same type of assurances, mechanisms, financing to be able to provide testing, to be able to provide safeguards that will assure that we won't have, a big rash of positives. Right now, the University of Michigan football team, apparently like over half the team is out. And obviously everybody's talking about Michigan and, not playing Ohio State. And that's a huge thing too. I mean, we're taking these things for granted, like these games are canceled, but we're going to talk about them forever. They're going to be like, what's that one blip in this rivalry between Ohio State and Michigan? What's that? Oh, that weird 2020 pandemic year. Oh, but these guys played in 2020. Oh, but they didn't play because they had too many positive test results. I mean, it'll be crazy when we even look back on this year. It's like, how do we even contextualize it? How do we contextualize the triumphs even? How do we contextualize the failures? I mean, in a season that is, disjointed from what has been a, 150 years of college football or whatever that has been seemingly, of course, there has been war, and there have been, times that have disrupted the pattern. But this time it's just us. Had the right approach been taken in the U.S., at least, because that's where I care about, because that's where I live, we wouldn't be worried about football season like we are now. And that's the part that is most disconcerting, is that we don't even know when this is over. So our sports teams can barely plan for the future, especially in college, because their coaches are taking, their orders from their bosses, who are taking orders from, another boss in the athletic director, or, the chancellor, vice chancellor. I mean, you just never know, because so many decisions are being made at levels that are inaccessible to most of our sports teams, yet they have to deal with the consequences of whether they can get on the field. I mean, some teams can't even practice. So it's been difficult. But with that being said, the New Mexico Bowl will go on Christmas Eve, 2:30 locally, if you are going to be there in Frisco, Texas, which is a suburb north of Dallas. And I think what we'll see is 20% capacity. We might see some significant green. I'll be there in my green. Fuchsia. Will be a bunch of fans from UH. Ryan. You'll see Russ. We'll see a bunch of guys we see on the road a lot, and we hope to see you. So if you're going to be out there, comment. If you're going to be there in Frisco, we'd love to see you. But this New Mexico Bowl is going to be one that is not easy for the Bows at all. I think this Houston team today, we saw that the teams had their signing days, right? So when you look at Hawaii signing days, let's go, kind of look at the boys that were signed. I also saw some of Houston. They got some big time guys coming in as well. Some of these guys are transfers. And we talked about that with the transfer portal now going crazy, because guys are going to be fighting for less spots. So even though that's the problem. Even if you are given this year of eligibility, you might not be able to play on your team, which is cool if you can go to another team. So that makes it even doubly harder for a lot of the players at UH, because all of these Power 5 kids who are not going to be able to make their rosters next year, and that's going to happen. It's going to happen in every school. But when you're seeing kids who are going to SEC schools who are saying, like, I can't make, I'm not going to be able to make the team next year. There's going to be incoming freshmen, and I'm going to lose my scholarship or whatever. And, the coaches kind of push you to go and find somewhere else to go. I'm not saying that that's happening to the kids at UH, but when the handwriting is on the wall, you kind of know, right? And some of these kids kind of know, like, okay, well, I'm not, like, going to be probably accepted here on the team next year, or somebody that's going to want to be, I'm not going to have money, so I better just see where I can go somewhere else. And we're seeing that already. We're already seeing that. The year's not even over. So this week, as the team prepares for the New Mexico Bowl, as they prepare, as Coach Graham gets to finally get even more practices, and that was a big thing. I talked about this. If you're listening to our podcast, I dropped a podcast on Sunday on the Hawaii Sports Fans channel. Check out the Hawaii Sports Fans channel, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your podcasts. We're hosted at podbean.com as well. So if you have the Podbean app, you can listen. But we talked about, this, given the bowl game means an opportunity to practice more. Not just play another game, but have practice. And that is huge for this team. I mean, especially because the NCAA mandates and limits the amount of days that you can be with your team, that coaches can be in front of their team. That limits the amount of hours. You can only have so many hours with your team a week. Okay, so that's the rule. And it's there for a reason, and it's good, right? Because some coaches, if your kids are there to go to class, because even with the time that the coaches get, it's a huge time commitment. It's a huge time commitment for any athlete. Whether you think they are there for football or for school or for both,
It's a huge time commitment to be a football player, to be an athlete in general, to be an athlete in college in general. It's a huge time commitment. So, you know, we're going to have to see who's there when the dust settles next year. But we have 7 guys that were signed in this early period, and this is a new thing that the football had only for recent years, that they've had this this early signing period for football. But this year, there are 4 high school seniors coming in and 3 four-year transfers, 2 of them from Power 5 schools. So, and that was something that I talked about, right, was that Power 5, once we see guys starting to leave from those programs, oh, you bet a bunch of coaches are going to be jumping on those names because, you know, just being able to say, I came from a Power 5 school. Already coaches are going to be, you know, they're going to be a little bit perked because they'll probably have size, they'll probably have speed, they'll have something that kind of separated them in the recruiting process from the group of 5 players. But, you know, it's not unusual to see Power 5 players go to group of 5 schools the following year. But this year we're going to see more. This year it's just going to be more with more players that aren't able to make their Power 5 rosters next year. So this year we already got a guy from Georgia who's going to be, you know, playing at UH. Colby, he's the first tight end ever on the on the Graham roster, and I'm excited. I like tight ends too. I think it's you know, a good place to have for, or a good position for quarterbacks in our offense as well. So that's just a personal thing. We don't have to have tight ends, but I like seeing tight ends, and that'll be nice to see one. But you know, Coach Graham is gonna be challenged to, how does he negotiate this offseason? How does he approach this you know, recruiting season? Because you can go all in on freshmen, of course, or you can go all in on JUCOs, but this year is going to be tons of kids that did not make their Power 5 teams, or are not going to be invited back, or are going to have their scholarships removed, and they're going to be looking for a place. So I think Coach Graham is going to be cruising that NCAA transfer portal as well. We already know once Mackenzie Milton put his name on the transfer portal, he was getting all kinds of calls. And that's the one thing. Once this transfer portal thing was created, it's like a service. It's like a dating service, but dating means playing college football. But you have all these potential suitors that get to come on and look at your profile, and you know, that's the game. That's the thing about that's great about technology and how it affects recruiting today, is that we really don't need in-person recruiting. Obviously it's better. I would love for coaches to be able to get into every important recruit's home, to be able to develop that relationship with the parents, with the student. But this pandemic has forced us to, you know, communicate from a long distance anyway. So this is something for us to definitely take into consideration in the future. How do we recruit over Zoom? How do we pull off, you know, these major coups of, or these major steals of talent from, and taking them from these Power 5 schools? How do we do that without needing to be there in their living room? How can we just find them over online, or you know, build that relationship over Zoom? And the coaches are going to have to do that, and they have been doing that already. So I think that's a positive for all Power 5, non-Power 5 schools who don't have that recruitment money, because, you know, some coaches, they can just book their first class. Some, you know, some schools, their first class seat, you know, I got this kid in wherever, in Dallas, and fly to Dallas. And that's another good thing that about this game being in Texas, I think, and coach being from there, is being able to bring that show on the road and bring it right into the heart of Texas, and with a place where UH is already starting to recruit, and a place where, if, you know, a big win over Houston, a big win over a team that's from the state, I think that would resonate a lot too, especially on Christmas Eve. I'm not sure how many games are on Christmas Eve. Usually Hawaii is not competing, but bowl games switch the days that they play all the time. So I'm not sure if Hawaii will be competing with anybody for the Christmas Eve slot, but, you know, it's a nice chance again to be featured on television. Obviously, a lot of people are going to be home because of the pandemic, watching, and sports fans will be watching football. So to be able to catch Hawaii football on national TV is a huge, opportunity for UH to get those eyes of some players who, maybe never considered UH, but they'll say, hey, oh, who's this guy from Texas? And he's the coach. Oh, they're running that kind of offense. Oh, they play against Boise in the Mountain West. Oh, and plus they're in Hawaii, and it's a beautiful campus. So this is exactly the kind of forum, the kind of stage that we want to be able to build a strong recruiting base, winning on national TV, and doing it in a place like Texas, especially where the local media will be converging on the game. People will be hearing about it. They'll be talking about Coach Graham, who's from Mesquite, Texas. His homecoming. So I think it's a huge opportunity for the Bows. I really believe that this game will be really important for jumping into next season. And I think beating UNLV was a great way to jump into next season as well. So having this game is kind of like, the worst that could happen is getting blown out on national TV. Like, we don't want that to happen for sure. And I don't think that will, but Houston is a good team. I mean, they actually have a losing record, but they played some great teams. They played a bunch of nationally ranked teams. And, the team like Tulane that they beat. I watched Tulane play this year as well. Tulane's a good team. So this is going to be a tough game for UH. So they cannot take it lightly. But at the same time, this is a winnable opponent. This is a winnable game. So Coach Graham just wants to seize this opportunity. He wants to be able to put UH on the map and leave a little bit of a footprint, because it's going to be a long off season. This season just flew by. It was abbreviated. I mean, Hawaii got a lot, quote unquote, games in with 8, but some teams had like 4 games this year. So a weird 2020. Very fortunate that Hawaii is able to, continue with a season and have the players be able to see each other in person, because usually if your season's over, you cannot practice. You cannot just practice just because you want to practice. There are still some NCAA rules, like when the season must end. So your season's over, it's over. But having your season continue is great in so many ways, and more than just a bowl game. A cool thing to see was Mililani High School pick up for UH as well. Sonny Semeatu. He's originally from American Samoa, but he spent the last 10 years in Hawaii, and he played for Mililani High School. So I'm sure Sean Iman is a huge fan already. He's an all-league guy, and he was one of the main guys on the Mililani defense, one of the best teams in the state. They had 5 shutouts. So this is a Mililani team program that we hope continues to feed UH, just like St. Louis, just like Kahuku. It is one of the programs that there absolutely needs to be a pipeline coming from. Especially for the good players like Sonny, this guy from Mililani High School, number 11 prospect. He's rated, at least by ESPN, he's rated as the number 11 guy in Hawaii. So this is really important, I think, to have some of those guys, but also get the ones that are willing to say no to the mainland schools, willing to build something at UH, and that's going to be ultimately what coach is going to need to do is find guys that are willing to build, find guys that are going to be willing to make a commitment to UH and build something that it's going to be rough in the coming years with budget cuts and just how UH is able to navigate their own issues with money and with financing, and it's still to be seen how that'll affect the team's performance. But we've been lucky at UH, with non-losing season for a while. It's been since at least in the last, so Rolo's first year, 2016, that was a 500 year non-losing. 2017 was the only losing season that we've had in the last 5 seasons. 2016 was 500. 2018 we were winning. 2019 10-5 obviously, and then 2020 to be 500. So that's nice to not have a losing record at UH, but that is also put in jeopardy by playing this bowl game. So we are hoping for the best, but we also know that this game, in my opinion, I think it was a good idea for Coach to take it just because it is going to be beneficial, and we've already gone this far. It's scary, though, because I think we're still learning a lot about how the virus is affecting college kids. If you look at in college basketball, Florida, a player at Florida collapsed. And it's possible he had a heart condition, and Florida had a rash of positives on their team as well earlier. So we just don't know, what to expect. But this Nuevo Mexico, they are a really fun in New Mexico. They are their culinary delights, their cuisine is extremely spicy there in Albuquerque, but I can't wait to go back because it's there's some really cool places in New Mexico as well that I wanted to see, like Chimayo and stuff. So that will have to be put on the back burner until we go to Albuquerque when we play New Mexico again, which I think is not for another 2 or 3 years. So maybe even 4 years, because it's weird. They're in the mountainside. New Mexico Bowl will be in Dallas. Hope you're there. Come check us out on the web, hisportsfans.com. Follow us on all our social media because we're going to be talking about this New Mexico Bowl all the way up to the game. I'm going to be there in Dallas as well. I'm going to be bringing some reports straight from Texas. So I'm hoping that you all will join me. Mahalo for all those who are patient. Today is the first day. I'm kind of tinkering with new technologies. So we had a little bit of a audio issue in the beginning, but I'll try and get that fixed for you as well. Mahalo for joining me, and we'll see you guys next time, okay? Take care. Aloha.